Good morning and welcome to this live stream event from the Mining Investment Asia Conference here in Singapore. My name's Mark Cheshire. I'm Executive Leader for Business Development at AMC and a Principal Mining Engineer. And today we've got a range of experts here to talk about the current situation and also the JORC update discussion. Today we've got Adrian Penny on my left as Technical Manager for AMC in Singapore and Principal Geotechnical Engineer. Steve Hunt, Executive Leader, Technical for AMC and Principal Geologist, also Chair of the JORC Committee. Peter Stoker online, Deputy Chair of the JORC Committee and Principal Geologist. And Rod Carlson, who will join us shortly, who's AMC General Manager in Brisbane and a Principal Geologist also, who will be focusing more on Southeast Asia. So the purpose of today is to get some feedback on the current situation in this part of the world. And I guess as a first cab off the rank question for Adrian is how do you assess the situation here, and is Singapore starting to open up?
Thank you, Mark. So Singapore is starting to slowly open up, as is most of the world and Southeast Asia in particular. It's been a long 2 hard years with COVID restrictions, but Singapore is slowly starting to open up, as I mentioned. The ability to travel in and out of the country and to other countries within the region is dramatically improved in the last month or two. And we're starting to see a lot more activity with people starting to visit the region again. It's been a pretty quiet period.
So this Asia Mining Investment Conference, it's one of the first ones that we can see live attendance. How have you seen the start this morning? Is there some more people here who are interested in investment?
Definitely. Yeah, it's been a very good start. It's a small group and it's still being run as a hybrid event with both people in the conference hall, which is very new for Singapore with this reopening. Mm-hmm. But there's a lot of people also attending online. But everybody has expressed some excitement about being able to do these things in person again. So that's a very positive sign that everyone's keen to get back into a business as usual or whatever the new normal is going to be in this region.
So do you see what areas in Southeast Asia do you see as being important in the next few years, given your experience of being here through this whole period?
I guess there's two main streams that I see, Mark. Projects that have been somewhat held back through COVID restrictions and inability to travel and some investor lack of confidence, if you like, through this period. Those projects are now going to start ramping up, and you'll see that happen throughout some of the major areas like your Indonesia's, the Philippines, Malaysia in particular, are really starting to get very excited about those opportunities. I guess with that is also the financial investments and the listings of these companies, particularly the small to the moderate sized companies wanting to list in this particular region, being it on the Singapore Stock Exchange, Hong Kong, Philippines, or any of the other stock exchanges in the area. So there's two facets to the future work in this region, as I see it.
And I totally agree that it's going to be an increasingly important part of the world. And I'm going to move to spend more time in Singapore for that reason, and to really beef up our exposure in this part of the world. So it's interesting, and it's good to be back live again in the conference.
It is.
The sessions have started, so perhaps if you can move back in there would be good, and good luck in the conference today. And we've got Rod Carlson, General Manager Brisbane, who's going to drop in as well, and we'll have some more discussion about the JORC code. So perhaps first to you, Steve, and you've been doing the rounds again of several conferences, and I understand you're currently live from one of the Queensland venues. What's going on with you at the moment?
Yeah, look, very much, like Adrian just talked about. So I've done 2 different conferences in the last week. In Brisbane last week, they had the International Mine Geology Conference, and that was, for many people there, the first time face-to-face for a number of times. And I did a full day workshop around areas of JORC code update last week. And I'm up in Mackay in North Queensland now. So it's the Bowen Basin Coal Symposium, and it's really the North Queensland coal industry. And I've had a number of talks and engagements here during the week too. And so, live streaming in now from one of the breakout rooms in Mackay. So it's my 3rd conference in a week. So it's the world is turning again, and I think it's very good for our industry. And I very much endorse Adrian's comments around, people now, projects starting to move forward. There's been a lot of chatter of that, and people, trying to get into the post-COVID world and get business moving again.
So what's the feedback been from the earlier conferences? Are there some particular themes that you really identified and that are going to be critical in the next update of the JORC code?
Look, one of the main areas, I think there's a shopping list of things that we're working through. Our process is that the updated code is likely to land very much towards the end of the year, with a commentary draft coming out for public review mid-year. From the top, there's a substantive review of the competency, the competent person sign-off, and that's a piece of work being exercised by a joint task force, which is the JORC Committee is part of, but the professional institutes who are the parents of the of the JORC code, being the AusIMM and the Australian Institute of Geoscientists, the AIG. And so that's quite a wide-ranging piece of work that'll run over a number of months around competency, how people become competent persons, and the mechanisms for people getting and maintaining the requisite skills. And so that's quite a big piece of work. There are a number of other pieces of work around the changes that the entire industry is going through. So the way risks are shared within public reports under the JORC code, the growth in environmental, social, or governance risks being material to projects and needing to be part of the early works. So, the best pre-feasibility case happens to be a case that actually can be executed, perhaps not just the biggest tonnage. And so that's quite a change, but it's more about the code reflecting the industry than the code dragging the industry down a new path.
Cool. Well, it's going to be an interesting journey for the next 6 to 9 months for you. I guess just, Peter, I wonder if you can perhaps, you've spent a lot of time in this part of the world, in Southeast Asia, perhaps comment on how these changes to the JORC code might affect companies and investors and professionals in this part of the world.
Yeah, well, it's an interesting question, and it's been exercising my mind a little because we've got to the point, and this was widely canvassed at the discussion workshop we had last week in Brisbane. But we've got to the point where the current definition of a competent person is not going to be satisfactory into the future, and we have to increase the controls or the guarantees for the investor over the competence of the competent person. And so I see the principal change that's likely to come out of this revision is the manner in which competent persons are defined, and that will have implications for the two professional bodies in Australia, but also for the recognised professional organisations that are also recognised in the ASX. Since the Singapore Exchange and the Hong Kong Exchange recognise the JORC code as one of the codes that people can use to report their mineral resources or reserves and exploration results, then that change will doubtless cause issues for that need to be educated, and that we need to bring everybody, the exchanges and the competent persons that are involved in the reporting, up to date with.
Yes, it's going to be an interesting change, and there's quite a diverse group of companies in this part of the world as well. So making sure that everybody understands what the requirements are and how we're going to go about it will be critical. So Rod, going down that line, you're essentially taking more responsibility for the geology questions in this part of the world, and picking up from a lot of the work that P has been doing. So how do you think we can really improve the communications?
Well, I think the key is just that communication profile, making the investors and the people making the decisions aware of the changes, the impending changes in the code, and continuing to update as things are finalised and brought to fruit in terms of the new code. And that's just a matter of informing through publications, through conferences like this, talking to the people on the ground, and making sure that they're aware that the obligations and the codes to which the professional people are reporting are in a state of change, and that will need to be addressed in the future when the code is implemented, but that we shouldn't ignore that it's not there yet, but that we should be starting to prepare that there will be potentially additional information required as part of pre-feasibility studies, especially in the ESG space, and also on the geological space around understanding what the risks associated with the geological resources are, and being able to measure, understand and report those risks in ways that are transparent to the investor. Yeah.
I guess, and that goes further, as a mining engineer and as opposed to the four geologists we've got here, the discussion has also been around operations and what does it mean to the existing operations rather than this investor new projects phase. Are there critical things that we need to be thinking about from an operations perspective? Perhaps Steve, have you got some feedback on that?
Yeah, look, one of the areas that we ended up setting a working group on to draft some options was around reconciliation. And although the current version of the code has always asked for reconciliation to be declared, it hasn't really been scripted very clearly in the code. And so, we're likely to end up with a new clause around reconciliation, and that both elements actually, from the geological, perhaps from the previous version of the model to a new version of the model. So some discussion around the what, the why and the wherefore of the changes. And in a mining operations space, year-on-year performance of the asset. And so although there has in the ASX been some rules around annual disclosures, some of that isn't very well represented in the code. So, it's always material to a mining operation to understand how you're actually going. you might be selling the same amount of product, but you might be doing that at the expense of 120% of your reserve in the year. And so you need to understand, and that's always material to investors. So that reconciliation piece is in focus. And I think the other one really around, the modern landscape around permittability of new projects, and the subtlety, I think, around from, in our studies around the study options that have the most likely ability to be able to get approved. And that isn't always the biggest pit or the longest life. And so those sorts of issues have to be sort of declared and worked through. So, the base case that comes through in a study is a good representation of the opportunity, for the company.
Yeah. I guess training is something that has been on the cards as well, and there's continuous education required as part of being a competent person. Peter, you are part of the team that does training into the JORC code and how it's applied. Do you see many changes coming there, or perhaps some compulsory training around these areas? Is that something that you would endorse?
Well, training, understanding what you're doing is always one of the fundamentals of being a competent person. How rigorously you specify that has to happen is a matter for some discussion still, I think. But I think the reception that both the professional institutes in Australia have had to the training courses they've run indicates that there's a need out there. Now, the AusIMM's been running the JORC reporting course now for 3 years, and we're into the 7th or 8th version of it, and there's thousands of people have been through it, and still the responses that they're getting from that are that it's well worthwhile. And I think people, and it's interesting, you come across people who said, I didn't realize a lot of this until I did that course. So I think that the training is vital, and making the training available to everybody and via online services. I must admit, you can tell I'm getting a bit on. I was a bit sceptical about how an online training course would go, having stand in front of people for a long time doing it, but it seems to work. It seems to work very well, and the interaction's good. So the professional institutes certainly have come to the fore in carrying out that training, and I think that's critical in the whole process of making sure that all the competent persons are competent, and they understand what it is they're supposed to do, not just read the definition and think they comply.
Yeah. How about extension to others, Rod? What's your thoughts on education for, say, board members that are responsible for the actual report rather than the preparations of the estimates?
Look, yeah, there are certainly, in my view, some of the errors or some of the reporting that's conducted that may be somewhat less than perfect from the reporting point of view are commonly due to the requirements from directors or the board to stipulate a certain message. And so the boards of the companies, whilst they may have one or two technical people, are commonly filled with, accountants and lawyers and so on. And so educating them as part of the story, absolutely, because their responsibility under the Corporations Act, as well as directors of companies, is to ensure that the company provides information in a way that's compliant with all the relevant regulations, and certainly the JORC code is one of those.
Yeah.
So there's plenty of auditing going on from a financial point of view, the compulsory auditing. What we would like to see, I think, moving forward is a little bit more understanding of whether companies are auditing their mineral resources and ore reserves. Are there other external checks and balances in place to make sure that what they're reporting is above board and appropriate for disclosure?
Yeah. Steve, have you had discussions with professional groups outside just the technical areas? Those that control directors?
Yeah, look, at the start, one of the things when COVID hit is that our public engagement strategy had to be completely rethought. And we did an online survey and a proper industrial strength survey around all elements of the code, sort of cradle to grave. And about 20% of the 500 respondents in that were directors, company officers, not necessarily practicing geoscientists and engineers. Okay, there's clearly a gap. I think very much endorse Rod's comments around education for board members of a non-technical background around the risks and the opportunities around resource development and mining development, so they as board members can ask the right questions. They've got governance accountabilities as board members, and when the executive management says we should do this, there should be an ability to understand and really ask the right questions. So I think there's an education piece available for two lots of people in the company space, and I think they're slightly different. I think there's the board membership piece, where board's accountabilities are quite different, and in the executive, in the executive directors and company officers and media officers and the like, that's about how to apply the code without tripping over any of the rules that the exchanges need. And so, really, if we just focus on the technical expertise, then the way that the messaging can unravel doesn't necessarily go through. So, I can see, and that's certainly an area under consideration for there to be more work. The AusIMM has developed a course for company directors and officers, through working with the Institute of Directors in Australia, but I think there's more in that space. And, that certainly came out of our survey, and that certainly come out of the professional feedback, which is that, there are problems in technical areas, but there are problems that impact outside of those group of practitioners.
Yeah. It's going to be an interesting question to see how this evolves throughout the year and what feedback we get from other groups that are interested in the whole question. So just moving on perhaps a little to the industry itself, how, Rod, as GM in Brisbane, you're responsible for some of the operations of AMC. So how do you see the industry at the moment?
Well, buoyant is one word for it. I think there's a lot of interest. There's a lot of new company listings on the ASX. The activity rate for exploration around Australia is at all-time highs across many states. The international investment community is up there as well. So there's a lot of appetite for appropriately skilled professionals. The market is extremely tight for the professionals that have the skill sets to aid the companies develop resources or find the resources in the first place. So the key really for moving forward is what the economies of the commodities will be, how they move. We've seen dramatic increases in prices in very short time spans because of geopolitical reasons. and that makes it a complex field. I mean, betting on a metal price at any point in time is a difficult one. Betting on it right at the moment is nigh on impossible, I would say. I was talking to a commodities trader here before, and he was saying, look, you know, the LME has reached a point where especially with the example of being the nickel price recently, where they've effectively failed to conduct the business in a way that provides the stability that the market is you know, generally requiring. And you know, his comment is that potentially the market might move online and move away from these structured exchanges.
Yeah. It's going to be interesting to see how that evolves in the future, and certainly the geopolitics will impact on the way the world's resources are developed. And perhaps we'll see pivots to different parts of the world. And I know in the business development side for us, you know, I'm going to be here more in Southeast Asia to spend more time with new and existing projects, but also African areas I think have got some real potential for the future in being developed, and we'll spend some more time with our UK and Perth offices to develop those. So it's going to be an interesting period, and it's a good time to be conducting the changes to the code. I think we've seen a lot more focus from communities around the world in making sure that developments satisfy their needs as well. So that's the social part of our license to operate, and also ensuring the minimal environmental upset when we go into certain projects. And I guess that, Steve, has been a real, not a shift, but there's a lot more emphasis now on the ESG aspects. So it's, do you see that same feedback from outside Australia as well as inside Australia?
Yeah, look, I think so, Mark. You know, the last update of the JORC code was in 2012, so we're coming up now to 10 years old. In the interim, after JORC was updated, the SAMREC code in South Africa was updated, and in fact they started adding in ESG elements into their modifying factors more prominently in their code update. And so this is an evolution of the world and the market expectations and investor expectations. And so, you know, we're not in the 2010s anymore. It's you know, time's moved on. Quite often now, the significant risks and impediments to develop a new mining project are sitting in the environmental or social consent areas, as much as they are in the old school technical geology, engineering, and economics areas. And this isn't about flipping entirely in the other direction. It's about getting balance between all the stress points, and really, you know, getting the best investable case, you know, into the marketplace for people to go and develop. You know, I think that's quite challenging at times, because, you know, we can see that there's, you know, potential development in some areas and around some projects, but ultimately, if they're, you know, in a high environmental worth area, or effectively the stakeholders in the local area, you know, aren't going to agree to it, then we all need to move on and get the best other version out there. So the code needs to reflect those sorts of stresses. They're out there in the environment. And a very good example I'd give is that, you know, out of the tragedy of the tailings dam failures in Brazil in the last decade, there's now quite good, you know, tailings standards have been developed by the industry. And so that's the sort of yardstick you can use to say how you you know, developing your tailings case for your mining study.
Yeah, it's going to be really important. So we're sort of coming up on half an hour now, and perhaps for a last word from you, Peter, you've been involved with the code now for many years. I can't remember exactly how many. How do you feel about the progression of the code development and where we're at now? Are we heading in the right direction?
Well, nor can I remember either. Pat Stevenson said to me once that I was on the committee back in the 70s, and I do remember going to a meeting, but I think the committee got a bit inactive then. So, but how are we going now? I think this has been an extremely useful exercise that's gone on. The survey, the working groups, we've pulled in. Steve's managed a process where we've pulled in a whole lot of people outside the committee into the working groups, and we've had a whole lot of input that we may not have got easily, even had we had the opportunity of talking to everybody face to face. And so the changes that are coming are, as Steve says, bringing the code up to date with where the industry and community has moved to in the last 10 years. And you know, I'm involved in a history, if you like, box of getting everybody on the same playing field about what a competent person is. And you go back and simple things like the competent person is always referred to as he. And, you know, we've gone way past that in the last 20 years. And you go back and you're quoting things and you've got he and you say, I shouldn't be saying that. Oh, well, it's quoting. So it's a continuous process. We move forward, you know. There were great things happened early on. This competent person concept was a great thing. Getting the code into the ASX listing rules was probably the most important thing. And that's continued on. And the cooperation between ASX and JORC is clear. And this time, we've made conscious efforts to have engagement with ASIC as well, who are the ultimate approvers of the code at the beginning rather than at the end, as we did in 2012. And so I see very positive outcomes for this revision of the code.
Okay. Well, I think that's probably a good note to finish on, that I think we are heading in the right direction. Giving competent persons the tools that they need and a clear understanding of the expectations is a really important part. And I know I appreciate it when you sit down to write a report. So thank you to everybody for attending. Thanks, Rod. Thanks, Steve and Peter. And we'll get back to the conference event and the presentations. Thanks all for attending.
Bye.
Enjoy. Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.